Hi, it's been a minute, but we're back. We got some more fitment tips for you guys. So odds are, if you're watching this video, you either just picked up FRS, BRZ, GT86, whatever you want to call it, and you're looking to get some wheels, tires, or suspension for it. Well, guess what, bud? We got the best free tool that you can use right here, and we're gonna kind of run through it, and I kind of broke down some suggestions as far as what is like the best fitment for these cars, whether you're looking for a daily driver setup, or you're looking to go something a little more flush, or if you want to go like super aggressive, get some fender to lip action or stuff like that. We got it all here. So we're going to break it down step by step for what you're looking to do with your FRS, BRZ, or 86. And like I said, we're going to be using the gallery over at fitmentindustries.com. And even better than that, once you know what's going to fit your car and what wheels and tires and suspension you want to go with, we got it all readily available over at fitmentindustries.com. So you can go check it out right there as well. So before we go ahead and get into this, don't forget to subscribe. And yeah, let's do this thing, all right? So we're gonna start out with like the daily driver setup, right? This is gonna be something for someone that maybe a little bit on a budget, like their only car. If you just want some aftermarket parts on it, you want it to look good, but you don't want to have to deal with any rubbing issues or anything like that. You don't have to deal with rolling fenders or pulling or buying any other aftermarket suspension pieces. This is going to be what you're going to want to look at. So as far as suspension goes, look at a set of lowering springs. It's honestly the best bang for your buck to lower your car to begin with, and something for a daily driver setup, it's going to be one of the best routes to go. As far as wheel size, just a general rough idea here. You're going to be looking at either a 17 or 18 inch diameter, a width between 8 and 9.5 inches to play it safe, and then an offset going to be sticking in that little bit of a higher range from a plus 45 down to a plus 38 offset. We'll kind of get into that in a little bit here. As far as tires, look roughly between a 235 and a 255 for your size, and then like I said, you're not going to need any other aftermarket suspension pieces or fender rolling or anything like that with these setups. So first example we have here is going to be 2016 Scion FRS. Now this car is running some GT86s, all right? We got an 18 by 8.5 plus 45 in the front and an 18 by 9.5 plus 45 in the rear. So this is a staggered setup, but honestly is a good setup for these cars. You can get away with a square setup. Honestly, you could more than likely run that 9.5 in the front, but with that high of an offset, you kind of start to run into some issues with like your back spacing and stuff like that. So I think if you're running this high of an offset, like a plus 45, stick with that staggered setup. Otherwise, if you want to go with the square setup, that 8.5 in the rear might be a little bit more tucked. But we got some Federal 595 RSRs, 245/35 and a 255/35. And then like I said, on some Eibach lowering springs. So there's going to be no wheel spacers here. This is true fitment, nothing else going on. The Eibachs give about 1.4 inch drop in the front and the rear. So a nice little drop over the stock ride height. And honestly, it gives you a decent, very functional fitment for these cars, and these GT86s look really dang good on here. So honestly, a great solid setup that's not going to break the bank. Got another example, this 2018 Subaru BRZ. So we got some Avon 1 AV20s. Now this is a square setup. So this is 18 by 9.5 plus 38. So as we go down with that offset, as that number gets lower and sometimes even into the negatives, it's going to be a more aggressive fitment. It's going to push that wheel further out towards the outside of the car. So plus 38 compared to the plus 45s we looked at, going to be a little more aggressive. So there's a square setup, 9.5 plus 38, some Continental Extreme Contact Sports 255/35. Honestly, this is almost the exact setup, at least spec-wise, that I was running on my own FRS for about 2.5 years or so, and I absolutely loved it. I think that plus 38 offset is a solid all-around setup for these cars with a 9.5 wide wheel and a 255/35. You can pull off pretty easily. You don't really have to roll your fenders or anything like that. But we got some Swift lowering springs, which is a solid lowering spring to go with. And yeah, we got no rubbing issues here. So if you're looking for a square setup, keep it real nice and easy. Honestly, this looks really dang good. So kind of moving on to the flush setup. So that 18 by 9.5 plus 38, pretty dang flush, and it's getting there. But if you want to go a little bit lower, maybe get yourself a set of coilovers, something like that. This is more the route that you're going to want to look at. So looking at some coilovers, looking at an 18-inch diameter wheel, 9.5 inch width with that plus 38. You can get away with a plus 35 offset. You play with your tire size a little bit, but you're going to be looking at between a 235 and a 255 tire. Again, no other suspension components are going to be required for some setup like this. but it is recommended to roll your fenders, especially if you are looking to get a little bit lower with those coilovers. First example we have here is this 2016 FRS on some Innovia Elders. So these are 18 by 9.5 plus 35. So for the tire size, like I said, you're probably gonna wanna drop it a little bit. So instead of a 255 like we saw in the last one, we got a 245/35. And these are sitting on some Tane coilovers. So absolutely fantastic, budget-friendly coilover Tanes. I had them on my car, absolutely love them. I had the Flex Z's, but you can get away with like the Street Basis or Street Advanced, depending on how much you want to spend, and then of course like how many features you want with them. Do you want damping adjustment? Do you want camber adjustment? All that sort of stuff. So yeah, again, no modification really needed outside of the wheels, tires, suspension here, and it's a really solid setup. You know, a little bit partial to the Innovia Elders since they are our own wheels and they look really good. But yeah, this is a killer setup, and honestly, probably one of the most common for these cars. If it's not the Plus 38, it's the Plus 35. The Plus 35 you'll find in a ton of different wheel brands. It's like a very common size to go with. Yeah, it looks good on here. Another example, we got this 2016 BRZ. It's, again, seeing those Avid One AV20s, 18 by 9.5 plus 38 on some 255/35s on some Tane coilovers once again. So again, very similar setups here, but it just works really well with these cars. It's a very sought after size to go with. You get a decent sized tire on it because these are very driver focused cars. And if you're going after a flush setup, odds are you want to really drive this thing and go carve some roads and stuff like that, and it's gonna be a fun time. So setup like this works really well. But if you're not about all that, maybe you just want to go after the looks of the car. You want to slam this thing on its nuts, all right? You want an aggressive fender to lip setup. Well, don't worry, we got you there as well, all right? So for an aggressive setup, you're gonna be looking at either coilovers or air suspension, all right? You're gonna wanna get this thing as low as you possibly can. 18-inch diameter, pretty much the standard for these setups. A 9.5 up to an 11-inch width is typically what we see. We don't really see much larger than that, especially on these stock body cars. Obviously, you get into wide bodies, it gets all over the place, but a plus 22 offset and lower is what we're gonna be playing with here. So tire size, gonna be a bit of a stretch. You're gonna be stretching these tires. 235 down to a 215 is what you're gonna be seeing. And then here is where a lot of your other aftermarket suspension components come into play, and that's gonna be things like your upper and lower control arms, your camber plates, and things like that. You're gonna need to roll your fenders and sometimes even pull them depending on how much camber offset you're running on these. So we got a couple examples here, actually 3 examples. So the first one, I believe we got on coilovers. Yes, this is gonna be a 2018 Subaru BRZ, and we got some Kansei tandems. Very, very popular wheel for these cars. They work really well. And these are an 18 by 9.5 plus 22 square setup, some Achilles ATR Sport 2s, 225/40 BC Racing coilovers, all right? So we got -3 degrees of camber all around, and the front fenders are rolled with a slight pull. So there comes in your additional pieces that you might need to play around with to get these to fit. But the fitment looks so dang good. The 9.5 plus 22. Mwah. So let's say you want to do that sort of setup with air suspension. How's that gonna work? You're really gonna lower this thing. Well, it works pretty dang well. You're gonna wanna probably drop your tire size a little bit just to make sure everything clears. So we got a 2016 FRS, we got some ESR CS12s, 18 by 9.5 plus 22. We got some 215/35. So we went from a 225/40 to a 215/35, dropping that tire size a little bit on some Air Performance air suspension. And as you can see, fitment still looking pretty dang good. This is gonna be a really nice setup for you. It's gonna fit well. It's not gonna be anything too crazy aggressive or anything like that where you're gonna really need to go in there and start dialing everything in. And this is actually the natural camber at all heights, so they don't have any extra control arms or anything like that in there. So you can still get away with, you know, your stock stuff outside of your regular suspension, coilovers, air suspension, or whatever, with this setup, and it looks really good. And then just to show that you can go even more aggressive with this, we have this 2015 Scion FRS, and this guy's got some SSR Professor TF1s, okay? 18 by 10.5 -3. All around, all right? It's a pretty aggressive setup, but we wanted to show you just what you can get away with. I mean, honestly, you can really get anything you want to fit, depends on how much work you want to do to it. So, kind of just an example of that. We got some 225/35 Achilles ATR Sport 2 tires, on some air suspension. So as you can see, good amount of camber. This is where, like I said, your upper control arms. So we got some Godspeed rear lower control arms. We got some Broadway extreme front camber plates. We got some P2M upper control arms, all that sort of stuff to go in to pull off a setup like this. It's a little bit more money, it's a little bit more investment, a little more messing around with the suspension geometry. But if that's a look that you're going for, you absolutely can pull it off. These cars can pull off quite the aggressive setup. It just, like I said, just depends on how much camber you want to run, how much else you want to stick into it, and of course at the end of the day, what kind of look you're going for. So there you have it. And of course, if you want to see just other setups, or if you want to just, you know, see like, oh, I really want to run this size wheel or something like that, feel free to hop on over to our gallery at fitmentindustries.com. It's a free tool to use. Just plug in your year, make, model. You can select a whole bunch of other filters depending on like what size you want to run, what suspension you want to run, what wheel brand you want to run, see what wheels look like on your car before you, spend all the money and then realize like, oh man, they don't really look good on this car. It's a free tool, go check it out. And of course, you can purchase all the stuff there, including control arms and performance parts and all that other stuff that you'd ever want for your car. So if you enjoyed this video and it helped you out, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and drop a comment down below on what car you'd like us to cover next. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to check out wheels, tires, suspension over fitmentindustries.com. I'm Gels, and we'll see you later.